stuff the whole bowl of macaroni and cheese in your mouth at once.
What's the wisest thing you've ever heard?
This too shall pass.
Don't poke a sleeping bear.
Just do your best, because you can try and fail, but you can also try and you can succeed.
When I was 6 years old, my family had a dispute with a neighbor over water rights or the use of water. And my father had made an agreement with the neighbor to have us water our own cattle in our own well first, and then they would water their cattle at our well after we watered our cattle. After several weeks went by after that agreement was made, the water ran short, and after we watered our cattle, there was no water for their cattle. Well, they began to water their cattle in the middle of the night, so it used up the water so that our cattle wouldn't get any water. And my dad was too timid to challenge the neighbor about it because there was an agreement that they weren't keeping. And so after a couple of days, my mother took a big black snake and woke me up at 2 o'clock in the morning. We went out to the well and stood there. When the neighbors came to water their cattle, she challenged them not to come near the well. It turned out that throughout the day, my mother felt guilty for doing what she did. So she took me with her to go back over to the neighbors and apologized for what she had done that morning. And on the way home, she said, whenever you make a mistake, always make it right before the sun goes down.
The wisest thing I've ever heard was my mom telling me to be humble so that God could exalt me.
When you're tempted to worry, ask yourself, is God big enough to do his job?
Never dig straight down on Minecraft.
Judge not, that you be not judged. For with the judgment that you use, you will be judged. And with the measure that you measure, you will be measured with.
I spent my career working as a teacher. And as a teacher, I thought I could explain things very well. And I had one student who was not the best student in the class. He came to my office after the class and he said, Professor Thompson, you're the teacher and I'm the student. Couldn't you do something other than simply explain something the same way twice or 3 times? I didn't understand what you tried to say. Can you help me with that? And I've thought about that ever since. I thought I was a pretty good communicator, but that told me that I needed to probably listen a little more and look at my students a little more to understand if I was connecting with them. And that has stayed with me. I thought I was a good listener, but I wasn't as good as I could have been. And that's always, in a way, it's kind of haunted me. Wow, I thought I was pretty good. But no, this student pointed out that I needed to think a little bit more about how I presented something, present it in different ways, make sure that they had understanding. And I think that's a lot broader than just the classroom. Talking with anybody, trying to communicate with friends and family, so important.
What's the wisest thing you've ever heard?
Never talk to a stranger that you don't know.
To be kind. God is an awesome God and glorious God, that he would never just stop loving you.
The wisest thing I've ever heard is, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give.
Perhaps one of the wisest things I've ever heard is from a guy, Heraclitus, some 500 years before the time of Christ, who said, you can never step into the same river twice. I thought about that. It seems simple, but what it does remind us is we are dynamic, even for the stepper into the water, because when he pulls his foot out, he has in some ways changed. And for the person who's trying to describe experiences from a few years ago as though the conditions were the same, doesn't accommodate what Heraclitus said, that it's not the same. It's dynamic. That's what it is.
What's the wisest thing you've ever heard?
But, dragons.